Hello, good evening, everyone. And thank you very much for joining us today and being one of the, I believe it's one of the 330 people registered to join this webinar. So my name's Ash from Blossom. I'm your host today. And our panel discussion is all about the upcoming EYFS reforms and changes in September, which, would you believe, is now only 3 short weeks away. And also what role nursery software has to play in our new world. Before we start, I'd like to thank our co-hosts for this webinar, who are the Nursery Owners Hub on Facebook, which is an exclusive, private and closed community group for nursery owners. So we're going to be starting with our esteemed panelists introducing themselves. Donna, over to you to say hello.
Esteemed, thank you. Thanks. So my name's Donna Gaywood, and I'm the project coordinator at Birth to 5 Matters. Do you want me to say a little bit of background, a wee bit, Ash?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. So I came into post recently, but prior to that, I worked for local authority for about 11 years as a children's centre teacher, and then another local authority about 4 years before that in a similar role. I also, I'm still in practice when I'm not working for Birth to 5 Matters, and my specialism is supporting children with social, emotional, mental health needs. And while I was in the local authority, I led the local authority nurseries before they closed them, daycare, and we had specialist units for 2-year-olds. And prior to that, I taught in school. I've also worked for private company, which was a family-run business that had, I think, 3 or 4 settings. I was the senior teacher there.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Donna. Tim?
Hi, I'm Tim Hopkins. I oversee the operations here at Humpty Dumpty Day Nurseries Limited. We're based in the West Midlands, and we have 4 day nurseries and 7 wraparound care clubs and 3 holiday schemes. I was involved alongside Donna, and I worked in the transitions group for Birth to 5 Matters. And I'm really, really happy to be here. And our settings are Blossom settings. So we blossom away each and every day.
Fantastic. Tim, pleased to have you. Thank you very much. Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Rebecca. I'm an early years teacher and also client services manager at Blossom. So like Tim just mentioned, I help get people set up and get to Blossom. Currently having a lot of conversations about the Birth to 5 and the development matters. So here for an interesting debate.
Fantastic. So Rebecca is one of my colleagues, and she speaks to, dare I say, hundreds of nurseries every month. Later on in this session, her and I will reflect on some of the commonalities of how, as a sector, we may be feeling in the run-up to September after an interesting 18 or so months and everything that's been going on. Jill.
Hello, my name's Jill and I work for the Jays Nursery. It's a rural nursery in Devon and I've been there for 25 years. I've been deputy there for many years. I have relinquished that role fairly recently, but I do oversee systems there and took on Blossom in May. So, yes,
fantastic.
That's me.
Gillian, thank you for joining us. For all of our attendees, a quick reminder that at the end of this session, where our panelists will be answering a number of questions, we will be also taking questions from the audience. So if you have any, I'm aware you're all muted and therefore unable to speak. You are able to post a message on the chat functionality on Zoom. So over the course of the session, any questions that come to your mind, please do post them, and we will try and answer and discuss as many of them as possible. So let's get started. September, as I said, is just over 3 weeks away. We all, as a sector, are busy putting plans in place or trying to put plans in place for the new EYFS, which comes into effect in September. And I'd like to start by discussing what practically it means for your settings. What exactly are your plans, and how have you managed the planning process to prepare for the new EYFS? Tim?
I think when it comes to planning for any change, and we have enough of them in early years, for anyone with any length of service, they know that things can become quite, they can go in a circular motion. Planning for us was really key this time. And also we're still in the tail end of the pandemic. We've all lived through. We started to plan and look at the changes when the EYFS went out for draft for consultation. The main reason being is we wanted to make sure that we were prepared enough to support our staff teams. That's been key for us, staff wellbeing, and also making sure that staff are informed with what they need to know. For us, our plan started, we started with what we felt was really important to us. It wasn't going to be about wholesale changes necessarily. And we wanted to look at what things we did well as a company, and we looked at that through outcomes for children. The big thing for us, the big practical thing for us, was how we plan and observe our children. Blossom has been a big help to that, and I'm sure it will, and I know it's going to be moving forward. We now use a planning in the moment kind of idea to reduce unnecessary paperwork that possibly we as a company have fallen foul of creating for the fictitious idea that is what an Ofsted inspector would want to see, when actually it served no other purpose than something for someone to fill in. If a box is there, a key worker, a group leader, a manager will fill it in. That's what we're very good at. So we've really removed an awful lot of the paperwork. But just because something comes in effect in the 1st of September, it's statutory, so we all have to adhere to it. There'll be no disapplications unless, of course, there are new ones. It's about making sure that we really do treat the statutory framework as a floor document. They're the things we have to do, so we will do them. When it comes to practical guidance, so Birth to 5 Matters or Development Matters 2021, or anything else that people are choosing to inform their practice, it's about knowing what is going to be impactful for the group of children that you're working for. And that can create some problems because it's about making sure that staff teams have the right information. So for us, it's certainly going to be a journey. We don't expect to be there on the 1st of September, even though we started planning well over a year ago. And if we're there by January, we will all be really, really pleased. But that will be an aim for us, to make sure that the vast majority of our workforce at the different levels that their skill sets are at, or their knowledge bases are just there to be developed on. And we'll use any means necessary to help them get there, because it's about not making it so burdensome for them, so they can spend more time with the children, having those high quality interactions. So the planning process has been key for us, but I'm sure flexibility is going to be key. And as I think the notion is in the sector, it's very difficult to attract people into any workplace at the moment, because we have had the fantastic offer of the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, which in essence means people are very reluctant to move. But we'll get there, and I really think that preparation is going to be key for everyone.
Tim, that's a very interesting perspective, and so great to hear about all of that planning that you've been able to put in place. As you reflected on and said, it's not a light switch, right? I feel like a lot is being asked of us as a sector, especially after everything that we've been dealing with, from the bubbles to the positive cases and the closures, parents and their uncertainties and concerns. We were speaking earlier, and Jill, you were speaking about some of the challenges that yourself and us as a sector have been facing. And I think that's an important part of the context of the lead up to September. I'd love to hear, Jill, about some of those challenges that you have been facing recently.
Well, I mean, our biggest challenge has been not being able to recruit staff. In our particular area, I know everybody struggled with recruiting staff, but we've had a nursery change hands near to us, and we've had a lot of development housing wise, and we have had so many inquiries for spaces. We've never been full, now we are inundated with inquiries that we are struggling to keep up with. We don't have enough staff to staff a full nursery. So to do any planning for September has been nigh on impossible. Our deputy went for training, and the idea that she was going to train the staff, but unfortunately she's now on long-term sick. So it's been a little bit of a nightmare, because I work in the office, but I've been working with the children. The manager has been working with the children 5 days a week, 8 till 6, doing office work in the evenings. So I'm sure a lot of nurseries feel exactly the same as we do, that it's just been really, really hard going. We've been having to cover staff that are isolating, and it's been left to a few to sort of pick up the pieces.
And Jill, I don't think you're alone at all.
No,
I think many settings are in exactly the same position. You know, I've said a couple of times we have 3 weeks to go, but actually, Tim, as you said, it is a gradual process of change. The EYFS, Donna, you used the phrase earlier of shape shifting, right? As a sector, we're being expected to change very dramatically. For those people who may be in a position where they haven't had much of an opportunity because of all the challenges being faced by us as a sector to think about the new EYFS, what advice would you give them?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what I would say to people is have a kind of a 1 month, 3 month, 6 month, 9 month plan, so that you can actually work it out. And if you think about how we plan for children's transitions, when children transition, we plan for them very carefully. And I mean, I said to you that my specialism is for children with social, emotional, mental health needs. But for children who've had a bad time, who've had life challenges, we take a lot of care to plan for their transitions when they go from, say, the baby room into the toddler room, or when they go into school. And we plan longer transitions. So I think if we kind of think of the sector as having had a bad time, then it would be worth using the same principles that you would use with children who've had a bad time. So take it slowly, make it very sort of clear so that everyone feels safe. The new EYFS isn't actually hugely different. There's a few kind of safety things, and there's a few kind of vocabulary changes, but you know, good early years practice will cover all bases, and then plan for kind of how you're going to go forward, but do it slowly and take your staff with you. Because I think if you try and do a thing where you start, say, right, 1st of September, that's it, we're all doing it like this, you won't take the staff with you. People will go off sick, and if they don't go off sick, they'll hand their notice in. So I think it's probably worth thinking about those sort of emotional elements around change, because human beings find change quite difficult, and some people find it more difficult than others. So what I would say is, that was a very long way of saying, is plan. And be kind to your staff, and don't expect them to do everything now. And if there's some things that are working that are within the remit of the new EYFS, then keep going with them, and do things slowly and carefully.
Yeah, and take a staged approach.
Very much a staged approach. And also, just this is just from my perspective, having done about 1 million Ofsteds in my career, I think it's really worth having a very clear development plan for the staff that's kind of on the staff room wall, but is also very clear to Ofsted that you know what you're doing, and this is what you're going to do, and this is why you're going to do it. So you have a very clear plan. And I think my experience with Ofsted is they understand that. And if they can see that you're, you know, keeping your children safe, you're providing good learning environment, you know your children, your staff are happy, and you've got a decent plan, it will be fine.
That's I imagine, a reassuring perspective, right, for many of our listeners today. One of the questions that we've had actually from our audience is, what do you think Ofsted's perspective will be on the new EYFS for those unlucky nurseries who get on the 5th of September, for example. How much do you think Ofsted will expect the new EYFS to have been implemented already? Tim, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm really lucky that I'm part of the Ofsted Big Conversation for the West Midlands. So I'm engaged in those professional conversations, and in my involvement in that group, and in the countless inspections as a practitioner, as well as a teacher, as well as a leader. It is about that professional conversation. If you have a plan, a journey, if you know where you are and you know where your strengths lie and where your genuine weaknesses, because weakness isn't a bad thing, but you know how you're going to plan to put it right, or how you're going to improve on something, that has to be taken into account. And I know that there will be inspections that will happen on the 1st, 2nd of September. I think I may well be in the minority, but I really enjoy those days, as stressful as they are, because I like to show what we are doing. I have a fantastic team of managers who I work with, and group leaders and practitioners who are passionate about working with children and making things better for children, giving them the right start. So we really see it as that opportunity. And as Donna has said, there aren't wholesale changes to the statutory framework. And it's really important for everybody to remember that Ofsted are there to inspect based on their inspection handbook, but they're there to inspect against the statutory framework. And they are very clear in the inspectors I get to speak to, that they're there to see what it's like for a child. They want to see those high quality interactions. And I think Ofsted are, again, in my experience, they are the same as us. They're doing their job. They understand what they will have lived through, exactly the same 12 months that we've lived through. They understand that the sector is going to struggle to recruit and retain and get qualifications, because on a fantastic day like today of A-level results, everybody who's getting those results have worked really hard to get those results. But for some people, haven't been as lucky. They've had courses cancelled. They haven't been able to attend sessions. So I think a realistic approach, but I certainly agree with Donna that having a plan, having almost like that self-evaluation that we used to have to fill in online, that you have something like that your leadership team know where you're going, and that and that the staff are there with you. Our greatest experiences when we've received those outstanding judgments have been when the staff team are part of it. We're all in it together, and we all want to strive to be the best, but for the children and their families.
Can I just add to what Tim was saying? Is that okay?
Yes, please do.
So from the way I understand Ofsted, what they really want to know is, do you know your children? So do your staff really know your children? And that's where the new EYFS has actually taken some of the pressure off of practitioners so that they can get to know their children. And I think that's one of the positives. So do you know your children? Do you know which children potentially need more support? And what are you doing about it? That's what they want to know. That's what they want to see. And how are you supporting learning? And one of the other things that the new sort of EYFS has got kind of going right the way through it is this focus on children's speech and language development. So knowing how to support children's speech and language development and being able to demonstrate that is going to be quite important. But it's not rocket science. It's just doing more of what people already know. It's just the problem is the pandemic has left some children with their kind of speech and language a bit trailing. So it's just sort of increasing that stuff, and then your staff being able to talk about it succinctly with the Ofsted inspectors.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things, reflecting on the new EYFS and the changes, that has been a positive commonality with all the nurseries that I've spoken with, is that renewed focus on spending time with the children. Now, that focus and not tracking just for the sake of tracking reduces the need for paperwork. which is a good thing. It reduces the need for potentially observations and the regularity of them. What this does present potentially is a risk of there being lesser visibility for management of how well practitioners and teachers know their children. What I'd be interested to talk about now is how you envision managing and monitoring practitioner knowledge of children within their care. So for example, talking about Ofsted, how, and Tim, maybe this is one for you, how will we be able to show Ofsted evidence of how children are developing, and most importantly, evidence of practitioners' knowledge of children's development?
I mean, for us, using a tool like Blossom, and for us it is Blossom, is going to be key. Having those opportunities to record quickly those golden moments of children meeting those developmental milestones, or doing something really well, or for the first time, or something that they're proud of that they've created perhaps, is going to be key for us to show that they, through the time period that they're spending with practitioners or in our setting, that they've gone from strength to strength because of the environments and the way that staff are planning and interacting with children. How, as a leader, I have, and again with the management team, we look at practitioner knowledge, and we get to gauge where practitioners' knowledge is through conversation. Whilst it's really easy to look at as a top-down approach at a spreadsheet about where children are achieving in kind of tracker grids and things, it doesn't really tell you much about the story of the child. And if Johnny isn't necessarily where he needs to be in a prime area, I really want to know the story, and the person I'm going to ask for that story is the key person, and the group leader or the senior. And if they're telling me what they know about the child, they're demonstrating to me that they have that superb knowledge of the child. And that's quite easy for them to have a conversation with me or one of my colleagues or one of their colleagues. But sometimes it's about that practice of talking to someone you don't know. And when it comes to Ofsted, we talk and talk and talk at our settings, because that's the most important thing. It gets the practice, it gets them going. And also as teams, when they see that somebody is struggling because that maybe isn't their strength of talking to people they don't know, they're able to support each other. There's nothing wrong with supporting each other in a conversation with an inspector, for example, or another agency, which is probably more regular than an Ofsted inspection. And I think for us that's going to be key. We're really emphasising on the quality over quantity, especially when it comes to written observations. But we're also realists. People do have things that happen in their life. They do move on to other careers. They have their own families, and they take time off, which is fantastic for all the reasons that they do those things. And but for them just to have that information solely inside their heads and have not shared that with other colleagues or in a written form, such as in an observation, it would be remiss of anyone to kind of not make those notes, no matter how brief they are, because we need to be able to build up a picture of how a child is going, because sometimes it can be about those missing jigsaw pieces as children progress through a setting. So, you know, we do encounter children who are developmentally are meeting every milestone we would expect, and they're thriving, and then suddenly something happens and you start to notice that perhaps they're not keeping that trajectory, or they're starting to do something differently. And it's important to know what has come before in order to plan for the future. So we're really going to be using those golden moments and spending time with practitioners to write meaningful things that mean things to parents, to build up those relationships, but also as professionals to share with others if we need to.
And Tim, as a quick follow-up question, have you mandated a specific number of observations, for example, that practitioners going forward should be undertaking for their key children?
No, and again, it's not one size fits all, but it is, and it has been for a long time. You know, I've worked in early years in particular, this is my 16th year, is the top-down approach to you need to make 2 observations on a child the pressure that puts on a key person, when actually they may get 8 amazing observations on a child, which is, who's really, on fire and is showing you all these skills that they're just acquiring. But somebody else who is almost having a developmental break, a consolidation period, there may be no need other than, sharing with parents what they've done in the day, whether that be through an activity diary, a communication booklet. There doesn't need to be a mandated approach to how much. And I still attend things where somebody will stand at the front and will be saying, oh, you need to make sure that you've got 3 pieces of written evidence for this and that. And it's a complete myth. And I hope that others would share that. But again, for some upskilling of practitioners, you may want them to be practicing that observational skill, and that's very different to mandating what's going to help with the learning and development of children. That's the learning and development of the staff, and we do set tasks for staff, newer staff, to practice that skill, because the more you practice something, the more adept you become at it, we tend to find, and then we're able to support and to make that process quicker or more meaningful.
Can I also say, I think it's important to remember why you're observing children. So, I observe children in practice. That's one of the main functions, but it's to kind of make an assessment of their needs for learning. If you're just observing children because you're observing children, it's like, for what purpose? So I think Tim's absolutely right. You observe children to make an assessment for their learning, so that you can plan for them, to work out where they're at, what they need next. But some of those, I was talking to some other colleagues in a different organisation, and we were talking about the kind of assessments that you make kind of from heart, So when you've got a really good key person, they would come up to you as a manager or leader and say, oh, there's something wrong with Bella. There's something wrong with little Bella. And what is it? I don't know, but there's something in her face that makes me think something's up with her, because they know their children, and those sorts of observations can't be necessarily written down. You're not going to write, Bella looks like she's a little bit upset today, but that there's something slightly wrong. So you might work with her in a slightly different way for that day, and you might keep your eye on her. Do you see what I mean? So I think it's keeping the heart of what observations are actually about, rather than seeing it as a kind of a tick box exercise. You've got to do this, because that's what everyone says we have to do.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, right? Rather than doing something for the sake of it, being purposeful in undertaking an observation for a reason, or understanding where a child is what's at the core of the new EYFS from my perspective. The way that sorry, Jill, go for it.
I just wanted to say that I feel that some of us have got into a habit of doing observations for parents rather than for the true need of what an observation is about. And I think that's what some settings are going to struggle with come September, because parents are expecting to see lots of observations because it's a snapshot of their child's day at nursery. And I think that's going to be quite a challenge.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's something that at Blossom, we've been thinking a lot about, actually. We've had a question here from a nursery called Early Steps, who have asked whether milestones and observations can be documented through photographs, so that staff aren't spending time writing things down for the purposes of observations alone. Our product and our creative teams at Blossom have been working hard to make sure that the features that we make available to nurseries don't focus just on a tick box observation approach, but they provide different methodologies to provide information to parents, because that provision of information is valuable. I have a 2-year-old daughter, and when I see a picture of what she's done at nursery, that picture in itself enables me to ask her questions about what she's done and to build upon her learning. Rebecca, I know this is a conversation you have with our customers all the time. Could you talk a bit about the different ways in which the Blossom system enables communication with parents?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something we're obviously speaking about a lot at the moment as well, especially in regards to what Jill has just said, that people are concerned about September. I've been having the same conversation with people, hundreds of people every day, and it feels like for months. And much like Tim said at the start, it's probably going to be January before people start to feel confident with what way they're going with things. On Blossom, you can communicate with parents via our two-way messaging feature. You also have newsletter functionality and a daily diary, as well as sharing observations. Observations, we've kept it very flexible, and we're doing much the same with the new frameworks with Birth to 5 and the new development matters. So you don't have to necessarily make links. It might be you're just actually sharing a video of that child's day, or you are making the links, but you haven't added a next step. So it's very flexible as a whole, but also with the new frameworks, flexible, you may have one group of staff that are leaning towards the new development matters and another group of staff that are leaning towards the Birth to 5. And as a nursery, you're able to have both of those frameworks available. I think kind of touching on what everyone's been saying already about the planning is key, but also the flexibility. Donna, you were speaking about kind of looking after your staff and being nice to your staff, and that's very key. Not, you know, we are going this way, good luck. It's everyone works differently. Everyone has different learning styles and different ways of reading the framework. I guarantee that everyone on this call might have taken a different thing from each of the new frameworks. And the same with the children. It might be that one framework is more suited to one child than another. So yeah, flexibility and planning are definitely key.
Absolutely. I think the theme of this session in terms of a positive takeaway is flexibility. Children learn differently, nurseries are different, parents have different requirements and needs. So being able to be adaptable in our approach, I think, is at the key of success and delivering successful childcare. Jill, just to add to that, you mentioned earlier that you have started recently using the messaging feature on Blossom to communicate with parents. How has that gone?
That has gone really well. I mean, the parents really do like that. It's been really good just to have a very simple feature that sort of follows the general messaging features on other sort of platforms, and it's so simple to use. I mean, I only sort of rolled it out simply at first and only let a few members of staff use it just to see how it worked, but very soon all the staff were using it, and it has worked really, really well. It is really good.
And that's good to hear, but it's also something that brings an interesting perspective on systems not being there for the sake of them being there, in the same vein as observations not being done for the sake of an observation. So if you're a nursery who doesn't use a system for any reason, it's important to think carefully about the benefits that, for example, improved parent communication may bring. And a big part of that is around the training you provide your practitioners and your teams to utilize the technologies that are available to them in the right way.
Yeah.
Ash, can I just go back to the question that someone asked about using photographs as an observation?
Yes.
Yeah, because I don't know if we actually answered that question. Is that okay?
Absolutely, Donna.
No, because what I would say is yes, obviously a photograph can be used without words to demonstrate it's a documentation of the child's learning. The other thing that's worth saying is and I don't know how your technology works or anyone's technology works, but there is a kind of a thing that if you show children, it's called double loop learning. So if you show children themselves, say, block play, or I don't know, playing in the sand, there's research that suggests that children will go back to that play having seen themselves do it and have a conversation with their key person and then develop that play to a more in-depth place. And in terms of learning, that would be an extremely good use of a photograph as an observation, because children, I mean, obviously I'm from Birth to 5 Matters, and it's kind of very based on the fact that children are powerful learners and can direct their own play and their own learning, and that would be a way of empowering children to do that. So that was just to say that. It was just when someone said, when you said that, it reminded me of that, and I thought it was worth saying.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's a good reminder for everyone listening. Somewhat related to that, we've got another question here, which I'm going to jump straight into, which is one of our Ofsted recommendations for this nursery was to monitor the progress of different children. And this was based on being inspected in December 2017 for them. So if Ofsted don't want to see evidence and paperwork, how would this nursery show this? Would they be happy for the nursery to just talk the talk, as it were? What are your thoughts on that, Donna?
Oh, it'd be interesting to know why Ofsted recommended that, because I think it's very important that children who have got kind of, I'll put these in inverted commas, they're more vulnerable to, they're called, I mean, Ofsted kind of term them vulnerable learners, but children who've got kind of more challenge around their lives, that they don't slip through the net. And it might be that Ofsted often put something like that in because they want to see a more purposeful approach to some of the children, say if a child's on child protection, or if they're in receipt of EYPP money, or they've got some SEND needs. And I'm just wondering why they would have said it. I mean, personally, what Ofsted have said is they need an entry, like what I call it a baseline. When children come in, they want an entry, an entry assessment. And then obviously we've got the 2-year review, which is a statutory review, and then is the end of they've got the baseline when they go into reception, and then they've got the early learning goals at the end. But if you're I think you have to be very clear that, well, at Birth to 5 Matters, we're suggesting that people do kind of decent summative assessments 2 or 3 times a year, so that you do have like checkpoints. So you go, actually, it's worth having a checkpoint here. This is a summary of where they're at, and this is the kind of next step. And the next step in terms of this is what I, as the key person, I'm going to support them with next. So personally, I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, particularly for vulnerable children, because they've got more stacked against them. We don't, it's not a level playing field often. So I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I would keep those checkpoints 3 times a year. And if you've got a child who's, say, got other professionals involved, you should be keeping a close eye on how children are developing.
Yeah, absolutely. And
can I add something to that as well, Ash? Is that okay?
Please.
Donna's completely right, and Rebecca and I actually had this conversation very recently. With having different non-statutory guidance for people to use in their settings, it's really important that settings engage with their local authority, especially when it comes to SEND support, because how for early years forums or those panels that work for the writing of EHCPs, it's always been based around development matters 2012, and now for the sector to have choice, to have more of a creative way of delivering the EYFS, which is fantastic. But it's really important to know in your locality or the child's locality how you need to be recording along the way those summative assessment marks, because that evidence will be vital in making sure they can access the support. Now, I'm not saying that's the right way, but I also understand from a local authority perspective, there has to be a kind of parameters for how support and additional funding and services are given. So I would just to add that on that we're already in conversations with our locality and trying to support with that, to make sure that the children that we serve and our families don't get left behind or don't miss a term of support that could actually be key in their child's development.
Absolutely.
And also, sorry, Ash, I'm just going off on one, but the other thing is that if a child isn't, I know that the government are kind of encouraging people to sort of ditch the sort of emerging, developing and secure, whatever it is. I can't never remember the order it goes in, and kind of thinking about, you know, they're kind of on track or they might need a bit more support. But, you know, for the children that need more support, settings should be, they have got a statutory obligation to do a graduated response. Like, you can't just wait for an external professional. If a child isn't able to access the curriculum, you have to then make reasonable adjustments within the setting, and then to see if those reasonable adjustments will help that child to then engage into that. So, and then if that, and you've got to keep records of those, and that's part of your kind of inclusion. I mean, I was a part of the inclusion and equalities group on the Birth to Five Matters, but you know, all of that is part of good inclusive practice, keeping the unique child in mind, but making sure that everyone can access the curriculum, but also access the environment, that you make changes where you need to. Sorry, I feel like I'm preaching, but it's probably because I feel very strongly about it. Sorry.
No, that's absolutely fine, Donna. And I think to have that focused perspective on the needs of the children is extremely important. So if I'm an attendee on this webinar and I am wondering, looking at September, whether I should be using Birth to Five Matters or the new Development Matters 2021 document, how do I decide? What should I be thinking about, Tim?
I was obviously part of the Birth to Five Matters team, so you know, but I also have read and accessed Development Matters 2021 and its second edition revision that came right at the end of the school year. I also would recommend that people look at the Working with the Revised EYFS booklet, which is free as a PDF, that Julian Grenier has written to go alongside the DFE published guidance he led. And I do think it's a very personal to a settings kind of choice. There's no one size fits all. I would look at where you are as a setting, and again, it's about that, where your strengths and weaknesses may lie. I think that the Birth to Five Matters as a document is going to be fantastic for ongoing CPD. The website is kind of the printed booklet times 10, and will continue to be added to. It's got professionally produced video to help support. It's got case studies. And as the document was written for the sector by the sector, the huge mixture of academics, professionals, even in the forum and focus groups that the coalition ran and the Birth to Five Matters team ran, they looked at unqualified apprentices. They looked at the views about how the document would be usable. Those bits of information, and obviously I was at an advantage because I was part of the project, but they really heavily swayed me as someone that is overseeing huge groups of people and having quite a large management team as a company, that we all know we've got a document we're using with the children, but also with the staff. Whereas it could be said that Development Matters 2021 is too vague, it's too segmented. There's not enough information there for someone who doesn't have a hearty background in child development, whereas Birth to Five Matters is written by those people who really, really understand child development, are passionate about the areas that they got involved in. But I would familiarize myself with everything available. Every day is a school day. There isn't a day that doesn't go that I don't learn something new or access something new. The same as our children in our settings. And if we can all be part of that, then that's fantastic. Also, you know, I think there can be some pitfalls to social media, but what a fantastic resource it is in 2021 is there are groups such as the Nursery Owners Group, you know, that co-host of this event. There are the new to EYFS groups. There are those that will support people who are going into early years in school. There are those who will support people who are involved in administration and finance in childcare settings. If you can think of it, there'll be a group for it on Facebook or Twitter. And just those little snippets will then hopefully inform people reading into and making other choices. But I think it has to be fit for purpose for a setting. And I am yet to go into a setting that is a clone of another setting. Even within small, medium, huge chains, they're all different because they're all serving different groups of children. They're all run and operated by different people. And I think it's important, when I talked about not making wholesale changes, don't throw everything away and start again. There's no need. It's all about those strengths and building on those strengths to continue on. And network. I kind of in my little notes, I kind of thought, well, who would I go to if I wanted some advice? And we often do want advice, and we want other people's perspective. So we talk to the local authority. We look at social media. We are members of the NDNA and the Early Years Alliance. We use Early Education and their publications, and they're all the sorts of places that anybody can access. There's something out there for everybody. There will be documents that are written by academics that will be taken by some of those more qualified staff, but there will also be things that are written from the very first, people at 16's first kind of steps into the adventure that is childcare and early education, that they'll be able to access. Again, not to go on about Birth to 5 Matters, but that's one of the things that the website is great at, because it takes those kind of 100, 200 word snippets in the document, and then it goes into some more detail. And you can carry that on and carry that on. The reference list and the bibliography, I know was people early education's, because it was so huge. If in the transition section that I worked in was a couple of pages long, we must have had about 20 references. I know in the observation assessment and planning group, they had 4 pages of references, all worthy reads, but it gives people that opportunity to self-develop if they want to, or for leaders and group leaders and seniors to give snippets to their staff teams to help them develop.
Fantastic. So one of the questions that, as you were talking, Tim, an attendee has asked, which I think touches upon that flexibility again, that many settings know that they need to have, is, can you use both Birth to 5 Matters and Development Matters? Now, I've spoken to a number of settings that will be doing exactly that. As you mentioned, Tim, Development Matters has less scaffolding, right? It's a broader set of a framework structure. And I've spoken with settings who have said that they want to use Development Matters for those practitioners within their settings who are more experienced, but actually use the Birth to 5 framework for those practitioners who they feel can really benefit from that additional scaffolding. Rebecca, could you briefly touch upon, again, that flexibility that needs to be in place in Blossom, or albeit any monitoring and assessment and tracking system to enable that sort of flexibility?
Yeah, so I would definitely say that, so from a personal experience, obviously I work with Blossom, so I am aware that we will be having both frameworks on Blossom, like I mentioned earlier, and you are able to choose on an individual child level or on an individual staff level what way they want to work with that. So you can have both frameworks turned on. You can also have the previous EYFS still turned on. You've got all the characteristics there. So it is really flexible. And like you said, Ash, I'm speaking to a lot of people at the moment that do want both on, at least for a couple of months, until they find their feet with it and find the right fit for them. Yeah, and obviously I'm sure other systems out there, just to kind of keep that not too Blossom focused, I'm sure there are other systems out there that will be adding one or perhaps both.
Yeah, for sure. Now, whilst we're talking about frameworks, there's a big move across the board towards Development Matters and Birth to 5 Matters not being seen as tick box checklists, right? do children need to be measured against some sort of a framework or guidance? And how can we advise nurseries to do that without adopting a tick box regimen effectively? Donna, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think good practice is more of a best fits approach. So sort of understanding the trouble with tick boxing is it's sort of a bit it minimalizes children's learning. It kind of makes it into like a robotic thing, like it's sort of a linear way. Children don't learn like that. Their learning is kind of messy, and I know in Birth to Five Matters they've depicted it in these kind of bubbly ranges. And the reason that happened, that wasn't originally there. It was after one of the consultations. People were they really, really wanted to depict learning in that sort of way, that it's a bit more messy. I think children, it's important that children are developing. The problem is when children stop developing for whatever reason, whether I think it's better to do a kind of a generalized best fit, because what we know, like you said before, sometimes children have what was it, Tim? I can't remember. Someone said that they have a kind of a stop where they just sort of consolidate their learning and then they go off again and do something else. And I think measuring children would probably be wrong. I think ensuring that all children are
I think Donna may have frozen there. So we will come back to you, Donna, very, very shortly. But whilst we're talking about the measurement of children and their assessment, one of the other things I'm very keen we touch upon is cohort tracking, which has become almost a bad word in the sector after all of the focus that was placed on it back in 2017. Cohort tracking at its most fundamental level is about assessing the progress of groups of children. Tim, do you think that this still has a place in the new EYFS?
Yeah, certainly. From the conversations that we've already been having this evening, you need practitioners that know their children, and you need groups of practitioners that know that the cohort that they've got. I'm sitting in our larger setting. It's a 210 place nursery. So if I didn't have the functionality of being able to understand where children were, I'd feel like I wasn't supporting the staff in knowing that some groups may be top heavy where there needs to be some intervention. But I think a big thing comes down to the cohort tracking of what the purpose that it has. It has to be for a reason and not an Ofsted recommendation. And I think Ofsted would respect that as well, that the Education Inspection Framework, 2019, there will be people who are sitting on Ofsted judgments from, 7 to whatever years, is that it's important to know, and especially when we talked about vulnerable learners, the reason that we're asked to track them is to make sure that they're making development, but often it's that we expect them to make more than average development. Well, who's to say what average development is for a start? But also so that they don't slip through the net, because we all know that early intervention is key to not then be a barrier to lifelong learning in the sector that we work in. And it's also important to realise that when we're given money through the local authority to support those children, that's to hopefully improve the outcomes for those children, so they then are able to contribute, to become the successful people we hope all the children we work with are. But it's about what it's for. So I've been honest and said that we've had spreadsheets everywhere with, emerging, secure, expected, and it down into who the key worker is. We're refining that, where actually we're going to use it as a tool to support not only the children, but also to make sure that early intervention can happen for our staff team. Because like everybody said, staff wellbeing is going to be key. And I think it is key. And I think it's going to be ongoing, that it's key that we can support, and realizing when children are struggling can often be a reflection that staff are struggling, because all staff come to work with children. All of the teams, if they work for Humpty's, they're there for the children, and if they don't feel they're meeting the children's needs, that will worry them, and it's an unnecessary worry, because as a collective we can put things into place. But I think it's about being clear from the outset as a leadership team why you are tracking who you are tracking. I think if you're a researcher or an academic, looking at the attainment of boys and girls is fantastic, but is the difference in attainment of boys and girls going to make a difference to the outcomes for your children in your setting? It might do, because it might be that the curriculum isn't exciting enough, or the environments aren't exciting enough for girls or for boys. But when it comes to looking at those children who may have been looked after, who have English as additional language, I think it's key that you know that information, but how you track them is up to you as a setting. What you're recording them as are on track, not on track. I've heard people use the word area of concern. Are they developmentally, are they on the right trajectory to meet those milestones? However you work it up, it's got to be there for a reason. And I think, but the removal of the idea of cohort tracking will worry a number of settings. And I 3-4 years ago, I would have shared their concern as a leader. But actually, it's okay to be scared and concerned, but make sure the decisions you make are right for your children and your staff team.
Absolutely, Tim. And there, again, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that if cohort tracking is undertaken, it needs to be for a reason. Interestingly, on the Blossom app, we do have the ability to cohort track and to collate information about groups of children. But for me, the most beneficial part of that functionality is the simple ability to add an action plan. And as a manager, to be able to look at data and put a plan in place for what you're going to do as a result of what that data is telling you. So having a sound reason is absolutely critical. The last question I've got here, and this is again for you, Tim, before we wrap up, is what would you say to someone who's still unsure about what to do in September and how to implement the new EYFS? Where can one go for information? What should they use as their starting point?
My first thing would be, don't panic, because if you're not in that position, I can guarantee after the 18 months that we've all lived through, you won't be on your own. You're not going to be looked at negatively. Don't worry about the stigma. If ever there was a time for all involved in childcare and early education to band together, it's going to be now. We haven't necessarily been treated as respectfully as other key and critical workers, but we've certainly turned up each and every day, and we've done the best. For me, and I think it probably is going to be a little bit of a repetition of a list, I would be networking with people in my locality. There doesn't need to be people don't need to be as precious as perhaps we have been as nursery workers or nursery owners or whoever, where actually we're all trying to do the best for the children. I would look to the local authority and seeing what they are putting on to help inform you, that if they've done a lot of the reading, that they can give you the summary points or some pointers for where to go. I would use social media. Social media can be problematic, but actually it can also be really fantastic. And some of the discussions that I find myself at ridiculous o'clock having on Twitter with people who I have never met, and although I'd like to think that I will meet, I have read something that they have published, or I know their nursery, or I know their school. I would also, if you can, use, there's the Out of School Club Alliance, the NDNA, the Early Years Alliance, Early Education. I would look at what your local universities are putting on in terms of the qualifications and light bite things that they may be doing. If you use online CPD, for everyone that will charge you £600 for a one-day course to teach you about the Early Years Statutory Framework 2021, there will be something you can find that is just as good that is free. Band together as providers for smaller settings. use your collective purchasing power and look to those people that you know can help support you in formulating these plans if you don't feel you can do it yourself, and share. I know that through work that we've done as a company with the NDNA, there will be nurseries, chains of nurseries, proprietors, consultants who are happy to take a quick telephone call from you, to ask some questions, to field an email, to reply to a direct message on Twitter or Facebook or wherever that may be. So don't feel afraid of doing that. I'm putting my colleagues out on the line here. And at Humpty's, if we receive a request for help or a question just about what we're doing, we will answer that. We want to make sure that all children, not just the ones that attend our settings, have the best start. So they would be the places. And of course, it would be really, really remiss of me not to say, talk to people like Blossom, who may be able to help you formulate your plan moving forward from 2021. Because an awful lot of the functionality we've been using in the last 12 to 18 months with Blossom is going to be integral to the offer that we have moving forward for our children and families.
Tim, thank you very much. Donna, welcome back.
Sorry about that. We've had a power cut here and everything's going off in the cutting. There's fire engines all over the place.
Oh gosh, perfect timing. We are just about ready to wrap up. What I'd like to do before that and before we finish is just recount some of the key themes, very simply, that we've encountered over the last hour. The first is, as I've said, flexibility. Be flexible. Think about your settings needs, your children's needs, and your staff's needs. They are very unique to yourselves. And as long as you are doing things which support your specifics, you will be successful. Don't panic is the second theme. September is only 3 weeks away, but it is an ongoing process. As Tim said, Ofsted and Ofsted inspectors are real people. They understand the context that we've been working within for the last 2 years. So take your time. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, make sure that there's a rationale behind what you do. Always think about the why and always have that reasoning. That's what will impact your children most positively. Lastly, just to reflect, Tim, what you said, here at Blossom, we consider ourselves to be an early years company more than just a technology organization. We operate our own nurseries, and aside from our software, which is fantastic, as I would say, we are here to help. We have a very wide network of hundreds of nurseries and many experts that we're able to get support from. So if anyone has any questions or needs any support, whether you are a Blossom customer or not, please feel free to get in touch. Finally, and to summarize, just to let you know, anyone who's an attendee today or anyone who's a member of the Nursery Owner Hub group on Facebook is eligible for a rather large discount to the Blossom Nursery software. So please get in touch with us if you're interested in joining our waiting list. We'll be sending you a follow-up email tomorrow with our contact details and with information about how you can get in touch with us. I'd like to finish by thanking all of our fantastic panelists, Donna, Tim, Gillian, Rebecca. Your inputs have been massively valuable, and on behalf of our 230 in the end, I think it was, panelists, we really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure. Thank you very much, everyone, and take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.